The reality of the French court was scarier than you can imagine. At first glance, the ancient Versailles looks like a great place to live in, but is it? Have you ever wondered why the gardens at Versailles looked beautiful and flowers blossomed at the time? They were used as a toilet in the famous ballads promoted by the monarchy. The human waste was most definitely supplying the manure. From beautiful puffy dresses to hairstyles that look like a nest, which took hundreds of years to style, what was life really like for the women in Versailles? Well, let's find out. This is History Rediscovered. To support our channel, consider subscribing. In this video, we discuss the sad reality of what life was really like for queens and women at Versailles. The Palace of Versailles has been in existence for over 500 years. It was the home of an absolute monarch built during the 16th and 17th centuries, labeled as one of the greatest achievements in French history art. I mean, it does look amazing, well, from a distance, but let's get in. King Loui XIV, also known as the Sun King, seems to have had a great imagination ever since the time he inherited the throne from his father King Loui XIII. His father had previously built just a simple hunting lodge, which was later replaced as a small château in 1634. But Louis XIV wanted a more comfortable palace to suit his lavish taste. He expanded the building into a palace in 1661 up until 1715. He moved the seat of his court and government to Versailles, making the palace the capital of France. Over 10,000 royals, aristocrats, government officials, servants, and military officers lived in Versailles and its surrounding lodgings. But it is no longer a palace as of today. That's a bit of some history of Versailles. Women being looked down upon has always been in existence since the past. The experience they had in the Palace of Versailles wasn't always favorable. The rules and regulations for women was harsher than those of men. The things women went through will shock you. Clothing for the Versailles women was torture at its peak. King Louis XIV of France permanently moved his royal court to Versailles in 1682. The Versailles was located in the wilderness, surrounded by stinky swamps with no shops or markets nearby to purchase clothes at a favorable price. Versailles garments were very expensive, starting with the court dresses, which at least every woman owned. Each anxious to make the most money possible out of the ghetto of nobles determined to display their rank and status, every single visitor had to pay for their own upkeep by expensive corsets, dresses, furries, wigs, and goldsmiths. Versailles fashion was admired across the world and continues to inspire great designers even as we speak now. Besides the dresses looking good, however, women pulled up their skirts up to pee where they stood because they usually wore puffy dresses with so many layers of fabric and were approximately 11 feet in circumference. It could be really uncomfortable sometimes to make movements and sit comfortably. Women and royals were also expected to wear very tight-fitting corsets that were so painful and nearly prevented them from breathing. Furthermore, they received training for many days on how to sit and walk around in public courts. They also had to make tiny baby steps to give them a better balance and look like they were gliding across the floor. It was one of many fashions that became popular because they render women useless and decorative, thereby advertising the wealth of their menfolk. Women's bathrooms and toilets were a disaster. At the Versailles complex, there was only one bathroom to be used by both men and women, except for the king, who installed first flush toilet only for his personal use in 1738. While the medieval castles had toilets and separate hot and cold water plumbing systems, the Baroque and Enlightenment era palaces had none. Even getting a hold of a chamber pot when you needed one could be hard. But there were chamber pots and latrines located in relatively discreet locations, but public urination also happened. Hygiene was an issue, and people just basically answered the call of nature wherever they wanted and in chambers, owing to the fact that there was limited plumbing systems. The heavily unlimited traffic latrines often leaked into the bedrooms below them, causing poison and smell. It was normal to see people in the act of relieving themselves. Agony is that it was the job of servants to cleanse people's discharge. Human excrement was thrown from the windows of the palace. It is allegedly said Queen Marie Antoinette was once hit by human waste being thrown out the window as she walked through an interior courtyard. Those who have been to Versailles have admired the huge and beautiful gardens that, at the time, were not only seen, but used as a toilet in the ballads promoted by the monarchy, because there were no sufficient toilets. Marie Antoinette bathed once a month and people bathed perhaps once in a year. The Sun King's personal hygiene is a matter of debate among historians. On the one extreme is the rumor that Louis took only 3 baths in his life. The belief that the king bathed only 3 times in his life is rather implausible. Louis did take care to keep himself clean, just not in the way we moderns go about it. They did not wash themselves frequently and covered the noxious body odors by excessive use of perfumes. Giving birth was embarrassing, requiring many witnesses. Giving birth for royals was actually the state's affairs, which simply means the whole palace had to be present during childbirth at the inner chambers. Women never understood what privacy was, because no one gave them a chance to experience it. For royal mothers like Marie Antoinette, it was even worse. She was expected to produce heirs to the throne as per tradition. Therefore, the birth of her child was witnessed by more than 200 people, including members of the church, ladies-in-waiting, the governess of the princes and princesses of the court, and those who had positions of honors at court. Immediately she went into labor and the doctor was notified. Everyone rushed into the labor room like they had just won a lotto. Others even climbed on stairs up the furniture just to have a better view. Oh, people can be clumsy. Now imagine how horrific it must have been for the queen. This was the fate of all royal mothers in Versailles. Unless, of course, they decided not to get pregnant, which was a problem as well, because they would be deemed useless and a subject of gossip just because they can't get pregnant. That was pretty rough. When Catherine de' Medici gave birth to her first male child, the king, her husband, demanded to know the exact time and date she'd deliver. As if that wasn't enough, he also wanted to see every single thing that came out together with the baby. Did it have to go that far? The spread of diseases. The connection between filth and diseases, which was well known in the Middle Ages, had been forgotten. The shock of the syphilis had been so great. Not only can the syphilis spirochete spread via bathing water, but many public baths were places for making out and even outright bordellos. And Treponema pallidum was even more lethal and dangerous germ than what it is today. You must remember that until the very end of the 19th century, no one made the connection between diseases and the strange animalcules that the scientists of that time started to observe in microscopes. Until the end of the 19th century, infection was just a theory. For a long time, the best protection against disease remained possession of a shield against smells, smelling strongly oneself, and also sniffing odors of one's choosing. It was therefore a good idea to have a smell box in one's pocket. Women covered themselves with aromatics. They also made concoctions by soaking a sponge in vinegar with cloves in a bowl and carry it in their hands so that they could sniff it occasionally. In the 17th century, they had no knowledge of vaccination whatsoever. Only the Ottomans and peoples across the Silk Road had this weird habit of inoculating people with smallpox on purpose, an idea that eventually inspired the English Jenner in his invention of the first vaccine in the end of the 18th century. Hot water was believed to cause illnesses. It was perceived bathing hot water was dangerous to health and caused illnesses. It was believed that hot water opened up pores in the skin, thus allowing germs or diseases to enter the body. Many women opted for a quick wash, but mostly through what we'd call sponge baths, cleaning up strategic spots with wet cloths rather than full body immersion. But some never bathed at all, and there was only one bathroom in the Versailles Palace. And there were limited cases like the overcrowded Palace of Versailles during the reign of Louis XIV, which was just dreadful. Historians believe the king himself only bathed twice in his entire lifetime, though he did care for his hygiene by wiping with a towel. But there's no concrete evidence to back this up. Life was definitely not easy at the Palace of Versailles, but we can always learn through history.